welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. I'm going to be your co-host this evening, and with me, as always, is my friend and partner in crime, Mary Lotz. How are you doing tonight, Mary?
I am wonderful. Thank you, Andrew.
Excellent. Well, tonight we're going to have a very interesting conversation, and it's been a subject of much debate throughout the entire country. It's also been a very sore subject for a lot of Republican and conservative people, and that this conversation is going to be on ending the mask mandate, mainly in Fitchburg, but I think it's going to also lead into a lot of national questions, and also why parents are so concerned and energized over this issue. So with us is our guest this evening, Jacquelyn Wehtje and Rosemary Reynolds. How are you ladies doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
Excellent. Jacquelyn, could you please introduce yourself and tell us how and why you got involved in the mask mandate issue?
Yes, my name is Jacquelyn Wehtje. I've lived in Fitchburg for 24 years, and this began for me in August when I went to the library and there was a sign on the door saying masks are required. And this was really shocking to me because the state had lifted its mask mandate back in May. And the governor had also lifted the state of emergency, which made sense because we had vaccines, we had ample PPE at that point, we had treatments for people sick with COVID. There was no state of emergency. And yet the city went and put this mandate into place without a state of emergency. And subsequently, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education put a mandate in for public school students, again, without a state of emergency in place. So I said to the library worker, I guess I got vaccinated for nothing. And she said, yeah, it's only, a couple weeks that Fitchburg, the library finally lifted all the restrictions and now the masks are back. But I figured, well, I'm here anyways. I'll try to check out some books. And it's always been difficult for me to wear a mask, but it was even more so in the library. It's a very old building with a poor HVAC system. And I felt I was going to pass out. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. My face was breaking out in a rash. So I left. And when I got home, I emailed the health director and he told me this was a matter for the Board of Health. So I went to a total of 8 Board of Health meetings trying to get them to lift this mandate before they finally did on February 17th.
Wow.
Well,
Committed.
Thank you for what you've done. Now, Rosemary, same question to you. Please introduce yourself and tell us how and why you got involved in the mask mandate issue.
My name is Rosemary Reynolds, and I happen to be on the school committee. So this is the business of the school committee. We talk about it every meeting that we go to. We get reports, and you can't escape the mask mandate question.
Thank you. Jacquelyn, next question would be for you. How do you see the mask mandate as a public health issue versus as a freedom for children to be expressive issue, or simply as a parents' rights issue?
I think it's definitely an issue of rights for children and their parents. I don't see it as a public health issue because the mask does not stop the small COVID particles, especially if it's not an N95 or a KN95 mask. And even with those types of masks, it needs to be specially fitted to one's face to be effective. In the healthcare setting, maybe in the schools and other municipal buildings, the masks just simply do not work. To me, it's a matter of virtue signaling and not any public health benefit. If I can give you a little background on my own experience with the pandemic. I have 2 elderly parents, one of whom has underlying medical conditions. And the first year of the pandemic, I never saw them other than outside more than 6 feet away. It was very difficult, but I knew I was in a public facing position and I didn't want to catch the virus, not be aware and transmit it to them. I missed time with them on their birthdays, on Thanksgiving, on Christmas. And when we finally got the vaccine, to me, that was as great light at the end of the tunnel, that our life could return to normal again. And 10 days after they had their second dose, I came to visit them and I gave them the longest hug I've ever given anyone in my life. And I feel like so many people like me did everything we should have done. And then to be told basically it's for nothing. To see that sign in the library was like a slap in the face. We went through all this and now you're going to put the masks back on. Why?
I happen to agree with you on that one, Jacqueline. I got my vaccine as because of my wife being a nurse. She wanted me to be vaccinated, and it seemed like it was all for naught, just because you still had to social distance, you still had to wear a mask, you still had to do all this and all that, and for all for naught. It was a waste of time, and it was a waste of time from the very beginning.
Andrew, I think your mother-in-law, actually, your wife's mother, said it best, and I've used this expression to many, many people. Your wife's mother, an elder living by herself, and you used to go over with the kids and bring her plates of food and things like that during the first parts of the pandemic, pass them through the doorway, wave, give her blow kisses and things like that to grandma. And she said, I feel like a zoo animal, that I'm behind the bars being fed my food. I mean, this is much like how we treated people to something like a mask that probably wasn't really going to be effective in the long run. Let me ask you this, Rosemary. You're a former city councilor. You're a current elected member of the school board. The other night, and what we're really talking about to viewers who may not have seen it, I know it's on a link at FATV, and I'll use your word, Rosemary, historic. There was a historic turnout for a joint committee meeting in Fitchburg where they combined the Board of Health and the school committee, open meeting, inviting citizens, residents of Fitchburg to come out and talk about the mask mandate in school. Rosemary, what was your feeling about that meeting? And Jacquelyn was at that meeting. What was your feeling? How would you sum it up?
I thought it was a most unusual, productive, historic meeting. We on the board, I'll speak for myself, I can't speak for others, but I always am so eager to see any citizen, anybody else show up to discuss or call in. Frequently there's Zoom, sometimes people will Zoom in their opinion. I find that most of the time my opinion runs counter to the other people on the board. And I have not had any means or way to speak, which totally, I just didn't know what was happening. There was no opportunity for anyone to speak.
No debate.
Huh? Pardon?
No debate. It sounds like there's never any debate. It's what the
No debate, no discussion. It's just, I kind of got the feeling we're there to rubber stamp whatever the superintendent sends us or says. And I could recall, I'm old enough to recall and have gone to meetings in the past where there was lively debate. It was so wonderful because people add, they add to it. And now I'm just going to go back a little bit into my life's experience, and where some people with some meetings, everything's decided before you come to the meeting. That used to be considered the professional way. We'll all have a meeting, but we'll all decide what the outcomes.
Yeah, wink, wink, it's a meeting.
Yeah. And I don't think that really works well today. I think you have to listen to what anybody is saying. Now that virtue of being able to listen has to be cultivated. Well, now I'll take a big leap and I'll say when we're all wearing masks and when the school children are wearing masks and the teachers wearing masks, you're losing an awful lot of development.
Well, Rosemary, let me ask you this, because in addition to your being a former city councilor and a member of the school board, you also, I don't know what Jacquelyn does, but you go into the school systems as a teacher. You are still an active substitute teacher. So you go into the schools. What is your impact or what is your perception on what this is doing to the children, this masking for 2 years?
My most recent applicable to this situation, I have been in all grades at all levels, but for the last few years, I've been with the high school. And I was actually shocked with the fact that the behavior of the students prior to this, prior to the outbreak and these draconian measures that were placed on us, the children were, I'd say children, and you had to learn. You had certain means that you, through experience, you developed to have a behavior control and interest in the class. Well, it had gotten to the point now where there's no behavior problems, not one. You recall, if you can recall, people, when I'd say to them, I'm a sub at the high school, they'd say, oh, well, that's quite a job, that's tough. And I'd say to them now, nobody asks me now, but you're asking me, no behavior problems in the classroom because everybody comes in the room silently with their mask, holding a phone, cell phone, and they go to their chair and they spend the entire class on their phone. And when the class ends, the bell rings, they get up, sometimes not even taking their eyes off the phone, and they walk out of the class.
Zombies.
Yes, very sad, very sad. It got to the point where I'd even enjoy hearing the voice of some of the children, some of the young people.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally someone would say hi, and someone would say bye, thank you. Very rare. So I don't think we've even begun to comprehend the damage done. And I don't think it was considered in the one of the considerations in the development of this plan. This whole mask is one thing, and you might recall one person spoke and listed several different harms that came from wearing a mask. I think we're paying a big price, and we'll pay a big price. It'll be cumulative for years to come.
Yeah.
What have we done to people?
One thing that really bothers me in regards to all of this is it was the Board of Health that put in the mask mandate, and almost like it was no big deal. There was no harm in wearing the mask. In fact, Bob Gazarian was the first one who said there is no harm in wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Au contraire.
Right. Au contraire, yes, indeed. Big harm to that. And many other harms that several which came out. And weren't the parents wonderful? Well,
I'd like Andrew to maybe talk to Jacquelyn about her opinion of the parents and the input.
Yeah, Jacquelyn, were you surprised at the large number of attendees at the public hearing that wanted to speak both in person and via Zoom, as well as the majority voiced opinions that the mask mandates end immediately?
I was surprised by the number who participated, but I wasn't surprised by the strong opposition to the mask mandate.
And just because you talked with these people, there was such an outcry to end it. It's useless. It's pointless. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort, and it's child abuse for the kids.
I don't have a child in the public schools at this time, but I, as part of my anti-mask crusade, have gotten on Twitter, and the experience of many people across the country where there are mandates on students is the same as it has been here in Fitchburg. And of course, there are parts of the country and also large parts of Europe where children were never mandated to wear masks in school, and they have had no worse COVID outcomes than we have.
Well, I think that was one of the things that Dean Tran had kind of brought up. The masks have had no impact, positively or negatively, on the number of hospitalizations. You can't bring that correlation back and say, because you wore a mask, you didn't have to go to the hospital. It had no impact.
Correct.
The masks that we wear, the little cloth things.
Correct.
So, Jacquelyn, do you believe that the Board of Health and School Committee heard you, but also understood where you were coming from and the parents were coming from?
I think the Board of Health heard a lot better. I mean, I'm sorry, I thought the school committee heard a lot better than the Board of Health. When the vote was taken, the majority of the school committee members voted to lift the mandate as soon as it would be allowed by the state, whereas the majority of the Board of Health members wanted to wait until at least mid-March. And to me, this points out a problem with how our Board of Health members are selected. They're not elected. They're not accountable to the voters. They are appointed. And 2 of the 3 don't even live in Fitchburg. I have checked with the city clerk as to how the city charter could be changed so that the Board of Health members are elected instead. And she told me I would have to get, there are thousands of signatures to do this. There is an easier way, and that's for the city council to do it. And I have contacted the city council president and also my ward counselor, and they say they're willing for this idea to come forward. I don't know, Andrew, if this is something you being on the council would be willing to try to pursue.
I would be willing to try to pursue it. In fact, I've also approached that with Councilor Di Natale when the mask mandate was re-established. I approached the health director directly and indicated that come hell or high water, we were going to overturn the Board of Health. As it stands right now, you wouldn't be able to overturn the Board of Health. But if we do take up that kind of procedure, absolutely, I would definitely vote in favor, because what you see what an unelected board can do, and
The power.
And the power and
authority.
unaccountability. I mean, just the way the Board of Health decided to be like, well, it's not gonna harm anybody if we just force everybody to wear these masks. No, we were done. We were done. And they took the power and they said, absolutely, you have to do this. And everybody knows it was a bunch of BS that oh, these masks are saving lives. The masks weren't doing anything.
Yeah, it's an arrogance. I felt it was arrogant. Rosemary, let me ask you the same question. You are on the Board of Health, the Board of Education, or the school committee. Did you have a sense when you walked in that night that they were for continuing the mask, but they heard the parents?
I had no preconceptions.
Okay.
I usually try not to have preconceptions, so sometimes you have to consider what you have experienced earlier. I'm always looking for real dialogue. And it's very tricky to do that nowadays, to talk. Mm-hmm. and it's not just one sentence or 5 sentences. Develop concepts locally. See, right from the beginning, I regret several things. I regret that the city school committee has lost a sense of local control. As long as I've been on the school committee, everything is directed, what has Boston said? What has Boston said? What has Boston said? And then they just do like robots, they do what Boston says. Mm-hmm. Whereas every place is different, and there's a real reason to understand your own region and what's going on in your own schools. And that should come first. And there was never anything like that. So again, you say the children developed to be robots. I think the adults developed to be robots. And I don't know if you recognize, I think you do recognize that it got to the point of where if you had another opinion, you really weren't free to speak. There wasn't a amiability or
a little bit of cancel culture, I would say. I had the sense that there was a little cancel culture happening.
Cancel culture got way, way out of hand. And but hopefully we'll go forward from here. But I was not surprised that what the parents said was, I don't think was fully absorbed. Even me, how could I fully absorb what was said? But it's like it didn't matter. So many meetings you go to, and maybe Andrew, you can say this. There's like you dismiss the people and what they say. It's a very dismissive society, I think, right now. And
Oh, very much so, Rosemary.
yeah.
Very much so. In fact, when I went to the health director and expressed my views, and it's like almost like, who are you? Excuse me, I'm a city councilor. I outrank you.
Yeah.
Also, when my children also go to St. Bernard's. They don't go to public school.
Mhm.
And St. Bernard's still maintained the mask mandate. That's because the public school continued to.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, St. Bernard's, they were pretty passionate about keeping the mask mandates. But I mean, for the most part, mandatory masking has been stopped effective, February 28th. Now, if you want to have a mask for whatever reason, students can feel free to act as they want to. But don't you think that is going? That's giving the people the option if they want to. Isn't that the
Absolutely? Yeah, I mean, we weren't, prior to this COVID crisis, we weren't used to people wearing masks. In fact, there was a joke, I don't know if you heard it, about Robert says, this is the first time they're asking me to go into the bank with a mask on.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. In fact, there was a lot of discussion, as the viewers and you ladies may be aware of. Some of the legal work that I do is Second Amendment work. So I do a lot of pro-gun type of work. And there was a big discussion on, can you go into a gun store with a mask on? Because there are laws that say that you cannot go in and purchase a gun with your face covered.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were worried about that, saying, can I do this? And my opinion was, you're being forced to do this. If you're being forced to do it, that then trumps what was going on, in the law. It doesn't stop your ability to, purchase a firearm.
Yeah, there's big problems with this whole thing. And as even following the development, in the beginning, we were all like, what in the world is happening? But wiser minds and intelligent people that were trained in the various aspects of society developed. But the school mandates that came down from Boston never developed. It just enforced itself more and more, and it stuck its heels in more of the same. So I don't think they did follow the science.
Yeah, excuse me, Rosemary, because we're coming to the end and I really want to look at now what. And I know there's still something coming up. There's still more discussion on this. So during we'll say 8 to 4:30 in the classroom, children, it's up to them whether they want to wear a mask if they feel comfortable. The decision is theirs, but there's no longer a mandate when they go back to school effective Monday. But what about kids in extracurricular activities? What about kids doing other things? Is this over now, no mask mandate, or do we still have some hurdles? Jacquelyn.
Oh, go ahead.
We do still have some hurdles. There is a Fitchburg parent who has submitted a petition for the next Board of Health meeting
which is when?
It should be, sometimes they change them at the last minute, but it should be Thursday, March 3rd.
Okay, next week.
That will be at 5 p.m. at 700 Main Street, the legislative building. Or if you contact the health director ahead of time, he can send you a link. Though in my opinion, if you show up in person, it has a greater impact. And she has submitted a petition to get rid of the mandatory COVID testing to participate in extracurricular activities and replace it with optional testing. So that should be on the agenda. I have not seen the agenda published yet, but it should be. And additionally, students are still required to wear masks on school buses. That comes down from the federal government and that expires March 18th. So I don't know if the feds will extend that or not. I would hate to be the bus driver who has to try to both drive the bus and enforce the mask mandate when the kids don't have to wear masks anywhere else.
I know. It's so there is still a meeting on next week to discuss these other issues. It's an ongoing issue, I guess. I think it's it's definitely a parental rights issue, but I think what we saw was we placed a lot of emphasis on young school children who didn't have the right to say what they felt. We placed a public health responsibility on their shoulders to go into school every day to learn, but to also provide preventive medicine to the janitors, the custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, the teachers, the aides, the administrators, because they had to wear masks and they were never asked about wearing masks. I think it was a large burden that was placed on the education of these young children to do that. That's my feeling.
And what's ironic is that the Board of Health also passed a vaccine mandate for school employees. So if they're all vaccinated, then why do the children need to wear masks?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I thank you. Andrew and I thank you both so much for being with us tonight. Jacquelyn Wehtje, Rosemary Reynolds, your insight, your being part of the community and being willing to speak up and take action is laudable. Rosemary, how can we correct this? Do we just need to, well, I know we can with the Board of Health. I mean, we can look at just changing that mix up and having our city council work to end that. But to change over the Board of Health. Excuse me, my timer is going off and it's going crazy. I guess I'll just sit on my phone. But Rosemary, is the answer on the board of the school committee to just elect new people, new blood, new thinking?
I'm going to say that if the parents arriving make a huge difference. So the parents being involved, without the parents' involvement, things are just going to go along some way that people of another opinion have nothing to say about it. So I'm saying the key thing is parents watch what's going on because society's changing rapidly. You don't have a clue what's happening. And you were very effective the other night. I think that's the key.
Yes, Jacquelyn, you were. Thank you both so much. And we thank our viewers for joining your Right to Know with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. We want you to consider becoming members of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Why? Because we believe in growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people. And I think discussing a topic like this is so timely. We are losing our liberties, folks, and this is a way to bring it back. Voice of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Andrew.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power.